I'm kind of curious as we start off this morning. Have you ever been in a room that was so noisy you could barely hear the person directly across from you speaking? I was in one of those rooms about 12 hours ago. When we got into the chapel, the wedding was great. It was nice and quiet. There was some hooting and hollering when I said man and wife and all that great stuff. But then we got to the reception and we had the DJ and I was really fortunate to sit at one of the family tables. But somebody in their infinite wisdom thought it'd be a great idea to put us right beside the speaker. And so we go in, and I'm sitting here, and the speaker's maybe about 8 feet off to my right, and just blasting away in this ear, and I'm trying to converse with Brent and a couple of other folks, and eventually I had to start plugging one ear just to hear the person that was 2 feet away from me. And I'm convinced, not because of last night, but I'm convinced now that I'm getting older that one of these days I'm going to have those fancy hearing aids that connect to my phone, and I can start drowning out all the background noise. I'm just convinced that it's going to happen because it's becoming harder and harder as I get older to sometimes be able to listen to the voice that I want to be listening to. And it occurs to me that in some ways, this is how everyday life is for every single one of us. Doesn't matter who you are. Each of us has a lot of voices everywhere that are trying to get us to listen to them, to follow them, to let them influence how we think. Young people, you guys have your parents, you have teachers, you have coaches, you have friends, Snapchat, music artists. I mean, they're all over. You've got them coming at you constantly. And every single one of them wants you to pay attention. Adults, we're no different. We have spouses and bosses and politicians and news anchors and media stars and preachers and teachers. We have all these voices that are calling out, wanting us to listen. And in all of it, we're straining. We're trying to figure out, okay, who am I supposed to be paying attention to? Which one of these voices should I be following? Now, you ask that question, and there are a few of us who like to get cute and say, well, I don't listen to anybody. I listen to who I want. No, you don't. No, you don't. That's just silly if you really think about it. There's not a single one of us who are truly our own person in that we don't have outside influences. Everyone is influenced by someone in your life. And we have someone, there is a person, and probably multiple people in your life that you hold in high regard, whose way of thinking shapes your own way of thinking. And while it is true, they don't make decisions for you, they hold enough sway in your life that you are going to make decisions based in part on how you think they might respond. It's going to make an impact, which means that you are listening to their voice and you are following them. The question that we need to ask then is, which voice should I be following? Because I am going to be influenced by them. And that answer comes to us in Scripture. We had read for us just a couple of minutes ago, John chapter 10, verses 1 through 5. And I'd like to read through that passage again, if you would. And if you want to go ahead and if you have your Bibles, open up to John chapter 10. We're going to be in this whole text throughout the course of this morning. But I want to begin and read back through what we had a little while ago. Jesus speaking to the Pharisees, speaking to a group of people around, he said, "Truly, truly, I say to you that he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief, and he's a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he has brought them all out, when he has brought out all of his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. I, Jesus says, am the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. There's one point, more than anything else, that I want you to take home from our time together this morning. And if you take nothing else home, please jot this one down. In the chaos of life, follow Jesus' voice. That's it. That's the punchline. You can go home now. No, that's what I want you to take home. In the chaos of life, follow Jesus' voice. There is no other voice as worthy of your time and your loyalty and your attention than his. Now, in making this statement, does that mean that no one else has influence over your life? No, that is not what we're saying at all. That's ludicrous. It's not realistic. But as we realize that other people, other voices have influence on our lives, what we must understand is that we only follow them to the degree that they reverberate the voice and the mind of the Good Shepherd. If those that are influencing us, if they don't speak with the voice of Jesus, then we need to surround ourselves with those who do. Now, someone asks maybe, okay, well, Cory, why should Jesus' voice be the one that we listen to? There are so many of them out there. Why his above all others? What makes him the ultimate shepherd that we should follow? Well, this is where, as we move down through our text of John chapter 10, verses 1 through 21, Jesus answers that question. And he answers it by contrasting himself to two other kinds of voices that we hear on a regular basis. He compares himself to the thief, and he compares himself to the hired hand. And what I want you to think about this morning as we go through this contrast between those two and Jesus, I want you to consider that these other two characters categorically represent every other shepherd that we might be inclined to turn ourselves to in life. But a closer inspection will show us that when you put Jesus next to them, there is no comparison. His voice outshines them both by leaps and bounds in ways that we may even never fully understand. And so for starters, here's what we're going to find. The reason why Jesus' voice is the one that we should listen to above all others is because Jesus has our best interests at heart. He starts off, I want you to notice how he compares himself to the thief. Notice how the thief is described, verses 1 and 2. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief, and he's a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. Now, I want you to skip down a little bit and look at verses 7 through 10 as well. He comes back to this idea, or he's talking more about himself at this point. And Jesus says again to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door to the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. And if anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and will find pasture. And the thief, though, only comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. I came that they may have life and that they may have it abundantly. As much as we want to think, as much as we want to think the best of people, I love giving people benefit of the doubt. I like to assume that most people I encounter are good people. And as much as I want that, here's a reality of life that I have to deal with. Some people in this world have a harmful agenda. It's just reality, okay? I'm not even throwing anybody in particular under the bus with that statement. It's just the way life works. Some people that you encounter have a harmful agenda. They look good. They sound good. And they put up this front of being experienced, being experts. They put up this front of being caring. And that they want what's good for you. But underneath the facade, their true desire is to harm. In that, underneath it all, he only cares about himself, not the ones that he's influencing. They're going to manipulate, they're going to work around to get whatever it is that they want and what they feel like they need out of you. And I want you to consider how that fits in with the way Jesus describes the thief. The thief has three objectives: to steal, to kill, and destroy. The goal of the thief is to steal our innocence, to steal our purity, to steal our dignity. The goal of the thief is to kill our relationships, to kill our hopes, and to kill our future. The goal of the thief is to destroy our reputations, to destroy our influence and our faith. So how then can we tell, how are we supposed to tell then if the voice that we're hearing is a thief instead of the good shepherd? They sound good, they're experts, they appeal to me. How am I supposed to know whether or not this is the kind of person I should listen to? And there's a couple of ways to understand this. Number one, how do you know they're a thief? First of all, he tries to circumvent Jesus. Notice how the thief in Jesus' parable, in Jesus' description rather, refuses to come through the door. He doesn't take the normal way in. He must find a way to get around the shepherd in order to get to the sheep. That's the only way he can access them, because Jesus is going to keep him out with his stealing and killing and destroying. And so think of this. When you are listening to the voices of life, anyone who promises fulfillment, success, and happiness without Jesus is a thief. Any way of thinking, any principle, philosophy of life that contradicts the principles taught by the Lord will only end in destruction. There is no other outcome. They are trying to get around and avoid the Good Shepherd. But we also realize that the motives are, it's not just that he's trying to avoid the shepherd, but we also see that Jesus has different motives. It's how you tell the difference between him and the thief. Look at verses 8 through 10. Jesus describing himself as the door, and he says, those who come in and out of me, you're going to get salvation. There will be safety. There will be provision. He says, you come through me as the door, and there's going to go, you're going to go in and out. You're going to find pasture and water, and there's going to be abundant life, not struggling to get through. Sounds an awful lot like what happens in Galatians Chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. When we have the Spirit of God living within us, when the Holy Spirit is working upon us and we're walking by the fruit, we're walking by the ways of God, what does Paul say? He says that the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And against such things there is no law. Folks, these are the things that Paul describes there. These are the things that bring true meaning to life. And they are not found in the voice that kills and destroys. These things that Paul describes are only found as a product of listening to and following the voice of Jesus. Because his motive is pure. Jesus does not call you in order to harm you. He calls you to bring abundant life. But perhaps someone could also say, yeah, but Cory, I know an awful lot of people in my life. I got a lot of different people that have made influences, and I know for a fact that there are lots of people with pure motives in their direction for me. They actually do want what's best for me. So this alone can't be enough to say Jesus is the ultimate shepherd over them just because he has pure motives compared to that of the thief. There's got to be more to it, and you would be right. I would not argue with the fact that there are people in your life who influence you that are pure in their heart. So then with Jesus, we have to go a step further to understand why he is the good shepherd. And we continue to see it in verses 11 through 13, because what we begin to find is that Jesus then has a commitment that is limitless. And we find this aspect when we see his comparison to himself in the hired hand. Look at what he says in verses 11 through 13. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute, because when we read through John chapter 10, a lot of times the hired hand is the guy that we like to throw an awful lot of rocks at. He's one of those guys you kind of love to hate because he seems heartless. Oh no, the wolf is coming, and he just ran. But I want you to stop and think about this for a minute. Why does the hired hand run from the wolf? It's not because he is completely heartless. It's because there is a limit to his commitment. He is able and he is willing to stay his post under most circumstances. But at some point, he reaches the limit. He reaches the spot he can go no further, and he must look out for his own interests. Consider, if you will, that the hired hand represents every relationship that you have in your life. And I mean every relationship that you have in your life. Every mentor, every authority figure, every friend, every loved one. Those people are in our lives for various reasons. They play a lot of different roles in helping to shape who we are and shape our direction and shape our lives. But what I want you to understand and think about, it doesn't matter who they are. There is a limit to how far they will go for you. Now, I can already hear what's going on in your minds. You're going, no. There's so and so, and I realize that so and so would absolutely never reach a limit of their commitment to me. They would go to the ends of the earth in order to make sure that my best interests were taken care of. And in most cases, that would be true. But the truth is, in most cases, if circumstances got hard enough, whoever it is you have in your mind would eventually have to say, I can't. I can't go any further. Or I can't go there. Now listen, as we say this, what this does not mean, I'm not suggesting that their love and their commitment is fake. Far from it. It is genuine. And it is lifelong. And it's not to suggest that their character is rotten underneath, because there is a limit to how far they're able to go. That's not what we're saying at all. All we're doing is recognizing that as human beings, we have limits because we are human beings. And the limitations that we have in relationships can take on a lot of different forms. It may be that frankly, our physical resources run out. I want to help you. I want to be able to provide for you, but the well has run dry. I can't do it anymore. Or it may be that the emotional resources are gone. In my life, I've seen some of the most emotionally stable people who reached the breaking point. And to have asked them to give more would have just been wrong. They could no longer give. They needed. But you also realize that coping skills play a part in this. Coping skills are those tools that you use when hard times come at you, and they help you process, they help you adjust, they help you respond properly to drama and chaos in your life. Sometimes we just simply don't have the tools in the toolbox to be able to deal with it. And there may be a lack of knowledge, a lack of foresight. I can tell you, I've had people come into my office through the years and they sit down and they say, Cory, I'm dealing with XYZ problem. And I have to be honest with them, I don't have a clue how to even begin to address that. I don't even know what to say. I don't know who to refer you to. And that was one of those things that any of you that ever trained for ministry, or you train to be, or you become a deacon or you become an elder, listen to me. It does no good to fake your way through a crisis. If you don't know, then tell them and get them to somebody who does know. And then go figure out how to become smarter and more educated and more skilled so that you can handle it next time. Okay, there's my aside for the day. I won't charge you for that one. And so here's the thing. We have our limitations. There is going to come a point that people will just simply run out. And here's the reality, though, with most of our relationships. For many of the people in your life, you may never have to experience those limitations. You may never reach the end of your spouse's commitment. You may never reach the end of your parents' commitment to you. You may never reach the end of that Christian brother or sister's commitment. But that doesn't mean the limitations aren't there. The point is that if you are looking for another human being to be your ceaseless guide, you are going to be very disappointed in life. Strength, knowledge, patience, and foresight have limits that they cannot overcome. But the Good Shepherd has limitless commitment. In Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 7, he describes what this looks like. It's the parable of the lost sheep. And there's one. He has 100 sheep, and one of them goes astray. Now, most of us, quite frankly, we look at that and say, yeah, percentages, you got 99%. That's batting pretty close to 1,000. Why are you really going to go through this? But no, the shepherd goes out into the wilderness, and he refuses to come home. It's not, I'm going to go out and go look for a little while, and then when it gets dark, I'm going to go home. He stays in the wilderness. He walks day and night until he finds that lost sheep, and he brings him home. And in John chapter 10, verse 11, Jesus lays it all out on the line. He says, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Folks, listen to me. There is no place that Christ will not go to find you when you're lost. There is nothing that he will not do in order to save you. His commitment is limitless. And we can take confidence when we listen to him as the shepherd. There's a gentleman, Ray Vanderlane, and if you've listened to Elton Stubblefield long enough, you've probably heard him mention Ray Vanderlane, but RVL tells a story. He's a guy that was able to go over to Israel, and he did a lot of studying in Orthodox Jewish rabbinical system, so he learned an awful lot there. But he goes over to Israel and he takes tours. He likes to take college kids out on tours. And he tells a story of one time when he and a group of kids went out, and they were out in the wilderness. And he likes to get a little off the beaten path. You know, he knows where he's going. But he said they got to a spot, and they'd been hiking for a while. And so they found some old ruins, ancient ruins. And they said, oh, this is a great place to be able to relax a little bit. So they took their backpacks off, set them in the ruins, and they went and looked at a couple of things around. And they said they came back about an hour later, and 3 shepherds had brought their flocks to use those ruins as a sheepfold. And he said the sheep must have thought it was a bank, because there were deposits all over our stuff. And it was just one of those things where he's looking at it and he's trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? So they intermingled with the shepherds for a little bit. Well, it came time for the shepherds to leave. And he became a little curious. He said they just brought all their flocks and they just threw them all in this same area. And he's trying to figure out how on earth are they going to separate out all of these sheep and goats. He says one of them took off and he went out about 50, 60 yards that way. And then one of them he walked out about 50, 60 yards that way, and another guy went and he walked about 50, 60 yards that way. And they just started talking. They just started calling. He said it was one of the most amazing sights he's ever seen. That one by one, those sheep and those goats just started rumbling around, and they started dispersing. And one group of them went to that guy out there, one group of them went to that guy out there, and one group of them went to that guy out there. And all of a sudden, Vanderlane says, I understood. I understood what it means when Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice and they come to me. As long as you live, there will be voices vying for your attention. It's never going to stop. Even when we go deaf, it's not going to stop. Somebody is vying for your attention, and naturally, there will be many people who are going to continue to influence you to various degrees. That's okay. You're supposed to have that. That's part of human interaction. But the voice that we must listen to is the voice of Jesus, the Good Shepherd. His is the only one that leads to real peace, to real fulfillment, and forever life. Jesus will go on to say in verses 27 through 30, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father has given them to me. Who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. I and the Father are one. And in this way, we are like the sheep in the story, scattered all different ways. Once we hear the voice of the real shepherd, we become laser focused on him. Nothing else matters. We become laser focused on Him, and we emerge out of the chaos to go wherever that voice calls us and wherever that voice leads. And this morning, the shepherd is calling for you. And if you hear His voice, and if you would come in humble obedience, you have the opportunity to follow Him this morning. Whether that is giving your life to Him in the waters of baptism, or recommitting yourself to following His voice because you've been listening to too many other influences. You have the opportunity. Question is, what will you do with it while we stand and sing?